Welcome to the Scaleup Valley podcast, where we bring the best tech leaders in the world to share with you how to scale a SaaS business from 2 million to 100 million ARR. Today, we have a very special guest. His name is Hanno Renner, CEO at Personio. And it's a really pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Mike. Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Awesome. So let's get to know a little bit more about yourself and Personio, and how did you start Personio, and how was your life a little bit behind when you had the idea to pursue this startup and scaling up journey nowadays?
Yeah, happy to give a bit of an introduction. So first of all, about myself, I'm an industrial engineer by training, studied different places around the world, but mainly also in Munich, in New York and New Zealand. And doing that and sort of throughout the studies, worked on different topics, but especially towards the end of my studies, did a technology management degree, which was a very interdisciplinary program where you worked with a lot of different people from different backgrounds on interesting topics and challenges. And I really enjoyed that part of my studies because it was working with smart people that were motivated to do something. We didn't get paid for it, but everyone was excited to do something. And it was a very entrepreneurial program. So also in the past, while it's not an incubator, a lot of companies has been founded of this program called CDTM here in Munich. And this working in that program motivated me to found a startup myself because I wanted to replicate exactly that experience I had there with working with these smart and motivated people and building a company where you had that feeling and where you could do those things as well. So there was the one motivation of building a great company to do something like that, but two, also, of course, solve a problem which actually users and people have in their daily life. And not just searching for something where you can make money with, but rather where there's really something that's unsolved that can be solved with technology. And there we came across HR eventually, which through one of my friends who was a CTO at a different company. They were managing as many companies around with 100 people, all their people data in Excel sheets and with analog files, and recognized all the challenges that came with that. And hence we tried to solve that for them.
Got it. And that's how Personio started.
Yeah, exactly. That was how we came up, or he actually came up with the idea. We then picked it up and worked with the initial customers. We were lucky enough to quite early on had paying customers that were for our early product, actually being willing to pay for it. We learned a lot from them. We learned a lot more about the market and also discovered that SME HR is a very unsolved and undigitized problem, especially in Europe. And we wanted to build a category leader for that market, and started with just bringing this Excel sheets into the cloud and making it accessible by multiple people, given that HR data is a very collaborative topic. But then from there expanded and digitized the entire value chain of HR, starting from recruiting, managing people, paying people, and developing people, and hence develop what we today call the HR operating system.
Got it. That's an awesome tagline to start with. And give us a little bit more context about the growth stage where Personio is in. So what is the head count, kind of interval of revenues? What was the last funding round? Some of the investors that you have in your that are backing Personio at this stage. So a little bit of context on the scaling up journey so far.
Yeah, sure. Happy to give a bit of an idea. So we started the company in late 2015, where then bootstrapped initially based on revenues from our initial customers, grew to a team of around 10 people and 30 paying customers at a time when we raised our first seed round, and have since raised a little bit over 50 million, I think 54 million in investment through 3 rounds. Our core investors are Global Founders Capital, Index Ventures, and Northzone,
Awesome.
which have supported us with money, but also their support along the journey. Since we've grown to a team of slightly over 300 people, with 308 as of today, but most importantly, of course, are now serving close to 2,000 HR teams in their daily life, which provides us double-digit ARR numbers. So a while ago, we've hit the 10 million ARR milestone and have since been continuing to grow rapidly, and are in the teens now.
Congratulations. This is a very difficult one to get there. And maybe let's start there before going to people and how your role evolves and how you build your leadership team. So let's start there. About nowadays there is a lot of pressure about kind of following the 222 double free pattern. So companies who get to 2 million ARR, then they go to 6 million and then 18 million. And then from there, double 3 times, 36, 72, 144. This is one of the famous posts of Agram, one of the investors of Battery Ventures. So what do you think about this pressure of being able to double and triple? It seems that you were fortunate enough of being one of the few outliers in the tech ecosystem to do it. But is this a requirement, something that we need to do if we want to scale a company, or there are different paths to get to the 100 million ARR?
I mean, I first of all really also like that post. There was also published back from Battery Ventures, and also that gives quite some guidance on how you can grow in order to become a public company. Another post I really like is from Rory of Scaleup Venture Partner, called the Mendoza line of SaaS, which also has a similar concept. I think overall, the importance of these concepts is they give us guidance on how, if you want to become a publicly listed independent SaaS company, how fast do you have to grow to get there, because that's the companies they've been looking at. And I guess if that's your ambition, and certainly for us this is, by becoming the category leader for Europe, this is the path you sort of have to follow and try to get to those kind of growth levels, because only those will get you fast enough to a sizable company that you will really then remain independent and are able to continue to grow. And that's what we're trying to do. Nevertheless, there's a post from Christoph Jans about that as well, that shows that there's been some companies that grown slower there too. They might not be then the public outliers then, but also there's a ton of, I think, good and solid companies that just grow slower to a different size. And I think it depends a lot on the ambition, but also on your market you're tackling, where not every market is deep enough, and not every company therefore is set up to become such a company, because there's sometimes companies grow really fast in the early days and then they level off at 10 or 20 million ARR, and therefore I think it's also naive to think that any company should try to achieve these kind of growth rates.
Very good points. And then let's come to this transition from the founding team to the leadership team, and how your role as the CEO evolves from one stage to another. Especially at this stage, you are with 388 people. You said it started in 2015, so which means a lot of transformation almost every single quarter, and at least in the last 2 years, it might be a little bit crazy to change the way you behave, the way you think, the way you are a CEO, because a CEO of 100 people or 150, 200, 300 people, or even 500, maybe in the upcoming years, it might be very different, and it's very hard to transform yourself so fast, as the company is also bringing you so many new and exciting problems to solve.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. First of all, just to correct, we're 308, not 388 people right now. But still, yeah, as you mentioned, probably in a few months will be 388, and in a year I expect us to be around 600. But nevertheless, I think you're fully you nailed the point of this constantly changing role. Actually, I've been recently invited to give a talk at an event exactly about that topic, on the changing role of a founder in fast growth. And per se, like one of the takeaways from me there, when thinking about this, again, reflecting, preparing the talk, but also when presenting that, is that for, like, of course, you name yourself CEO in the very beginning, because that's what you do as a founder. But for a very long time, you don't do anything that's really CEO kind of work, because CEO provides guidance to the company, defines the strategy. I mean, you do, of course, investor pitches and external representation, which you might do them earlier, but a lot of things that is actually CEO work, you don't really do, or you shouldn't even spend a lot of time on, because early on, there's other things that are much more important, like you're being the first salespeople person, you're being maybe the accountant, because that's there's no one there to do that. And then eventually, as the first team grows, you develop into team leads of different areas, and you're building up different teams, and then you hire middle management, and then only eventually, I think probably half a year ago to a year ago, we for the first time had this full executive team staff which reports into me, and since there's more and more roles that I do as a CEO. But before, there are things also when you move into a new office that you have to organize the toilet paper, because it's not a process that's organized yet. And if this is the problem, of the biggest problem of the company right now, then you as a CEO or as a founder, you solve it. And therefore there's certainly a lot of change. But yeah, you're right. I think with each phase and which sort of any step function in employee headcount growth, the requirements towards you and your role shift. And I think you have to be really comfortable with that change. You have to really enjoy this kind of uncertainty you're constantly in, and this ability. I often give the reference towards to being thrown into cold water, but then you're trying to tread water, and the water never gets warm, because constantly when as soon as you feel comfortable in the CEO of a 100 people business, your company is 200 people. And by the time you figured out how to run a 200 people business, you might be 400. And therefore, you have to be comfortable with that kind of change and enjoy it, but also talk to a lot of people and learn from them.
Yeah, and something that is really, really difficult, and part of the job of the CEO is really, as you said, setting up the vision, having crystal clear vision, being able to communicate to the market and to all, the entire organization, and also setting up the team to execute that vision without doing anything, and letting them as the experts in their areas to go into that direction. And of course, the kind of people that you also lead in the beginning and nowadays have very different profiles. So it's very easy at this stage of the company to start to have very strong leaders, and your leadership style needs to be a little bit different. And I like to kind of say that it's kind of the shark style nowadays. And in order to be able to deal with those strong personalities that are really important for the company, but being able to have them working together in the same direction. So sometimes I like to compare it with soccer. So when we have the Galactics all together in a soccer team, or it's very difficult to have them working together because their egos are super, super strong. So long story short, how did you need to how did you change your leadership style from 100 people to 300 people nowadays, and how did you build your leadership team in terms of structure?
Yeah, so I think it starts a bit earlier from what you mentioned in regards to the vision and strategy, which is something which you constantly, especially internally, I think even more than externally, have to communicate and reiterate, and actually on a weekly basis talk to everyone in the company on exactly the same 3 points. This is our core purpose, this is the reason we exist, this is our strategic vision, this is how we want to execute this, and this is our BHAG, this is what we want to become. And that these 3 slides are the first 3 slides I talk about on every single all team every Friday afternoon. That said, and I think then once you've defined that and we've done that quite early on, you of course have to build an organization around that can execute on that. And I think before you need the leaders for that, you first have to structure the organization. And we were lucky enough that we had, when we were quite early, able to have angel investors that had gone through that journey already. They were part of our seed round, since we never really had an angel round, but they've been helping us a lot from their experience growing a company of 100 people. And we've therefore implemented a lot of those learnings despite being first-time founders from the beginning on. And that was in a way really helpful, because it helped us not going through a lot of growth pains by having an organization that from the beginning on was structured, even if there was only one person in a certain part of the org that had a clear goal. So we looked at our customer journey and then looked at what kind of roles and functions and do we need in order to reach those goals. And then we defined this organization as a mission-based organization. So every part of this organization had a mission that defines how it's contributing to the core purpose and to the strategic vision. And with this mission-based organization, this felt like turned out to be quite a scalable approach, because as soon as one area grew, for example, our customer success team, which is today 90 people, we were able to just create submissions from the overall maximize customer value as their channel vision to a mission to go down to the implementation team having a separate vision than this the service team and the growth team and so on. And therefore, I think that really helped to create that clarity, and also to then define what kind of leader do we need for the different missions at a time, and then of course working with the OKRs in order to measure those missions on a quarterly basis.
And this is a very good point, which is, in order to scale it, as you said, it's all about that clarity and about and the strategic exercise or the strategy job. It's all about a subtraction exercise. So it's what we need to kill, what complexity do we need to simplify in order to make it easier to scale to the next level. And sometimes it's a kind of a balance of offering new products and at the same time killing products, serving new segments and killing segments, opening new geos and killing geos. So kind of doubling down and killing at the same time. It's kind of an exercise of opening and closing. So how do you find focus and how do you assure that you don't get your strategy too much complicated so people don't know where are we, who are we trying to solve, what pain points are we trying to solve for that customer, and what is our core customer?
Yeah, I think for us, we actually never really followed this strategy of opening and closing and changing and adapting, because I think it's a bit harder also, maybe in our segment, but B2B in general, to be so much back and forth. One, because the uncertainty it creates internally in the organization, but also in regards to customers, that you might raise certain expectations, then you shut them down again. So therefore, we've always tried to preempt that through good decision making, and rather be a bit more narrow on what we do and then expand over time. So for example, with internationalization, a lot of people were always asking, you claim to want to become the European category leader, so but you're mainly focused on the German market and or the DACH market, Germany, also Switzerland. Why wouldn't you start already going into other markets? And we always said, it's clear that we're going to do it, and by now we have done. I'm going to come to that in a second. But for a really long time is that we need to remain focused, because we can't afford adding this complexity at the size of the organization, which we back then were. Now, having grown to a much larger team, having the leaders in place, and then being able to just hire a head of international that drives this international organization, while our VP sales can still focus on the core market that delivers millions of added MRR every quarter, we are able to really add this kind of complexity, but then now really also execute on it and try to do so. So therefore, it was always a question of how much additional complexity can we afford to take in as an organization, and then whenever we felt we can take in more, than add the new lever.
Got it. Cool. And so we discussed people and the way you needed to transform yourself as the company was scaling, and how to build your leadership team, strategy. So how do you drive focus, clarity for everyone in the company, and also for the market? And so it's time to discuss execution. It's all related to the previous point. So having clarity on the strategy, having focus, and at the same time having the right people on the right seats. But what are those rhythms? And you just described one of them before, which is every single Friday. So it is an all ends or town hall rhythm that you repeat what is the mission, the vision, the purpose, and the values of the company to the entire organization. So what are some of those meeting rhythms that you have in place that have been more helpful to you to drive execution, to inspire execution, and to have everyone on the same page?
Yeah, I think it's really, I mean, as I said, there's alignment, is constant talking about it and sharing this with the team, and then having also, I mean, we have annual company OKRs that help us define goals across the entire company, and then on a quarterly rhythm, each team and department works on their OKRs to match them and make sure that their goals are aligned, and they also on a daily basis have a lever for prioritization, but also have the ability to understand how they fit into the overall picture.
Got it. So in your case, it's much more about OKR rhythms that are being important to you to drive execution and inspire execution.
Yeah, I think they are a very important part for us to communicate priorities and also enable people to have the shared understanding.
Got it. And of course, we couldn't conclude a discussion about scaling up without touching cash. So because we all know that cash is really something critical when we are scaling up, and there is a lot of pressure, and that's why we use VC money to be able to grow quicker, even being scalable, repeatable, and profitable. And that's why also this VC money is available, because there is a clear path in order to have the return on investment and to win the opportunity in the market. So what were some of your of the lessons raising your Series B? And the second part is what do you think that you need to achieve in order to be successful raising an eventual Series C?
Yeah, so I think generally, I mean, our Series B was probably an outlier, but that happens quite often in today's market. If you're being successful, that your round gets preempted. So we were actually not needing any additional cash. We still were well financed from our Series A, and we're executing well along. And then Index Ventures approached us and made a push and a move towards convincing us to raise earlier and get around with them together, which was exactly the right thing for us to do at the time, because we could do that very efficiently. We always had good conversation with Index Ventures in the past and felt that they're a good fund to get on board. It was an efficient way for us to continue to focus on building what we needed to build. That said, of course, I mean, something like that might happen again. We constantly have some outreach of investors, but for the Series C, generally independent from a preemptive process, I think the two big things which we've been doing in the last year since our Series B, and which also the drivers for raising a successful Series C and continuing to growing towards our goals, is one, the internationalization, where we started to expand into Spain, UK, Nordics, and Benelux. And we're already seeing quite some traction there and adding new customers, but proving that we can continue to scale there will be an important one. And secondly, we've made an acquisition earlier this year with a company in Madrid, which now is a big office for us as well, called Rollbox, with which we now are able to offer a fully automated payroll solution to our customers, and proving that acquisition to be successful, which we're already seeing a lot of signs for, is in the second one, which is, I think, relevant for Series C. But essentially, I think I would never optimize for, I mean, raising money is important, but ideally just optimizing for what's best for the business and what's best for achieving your long-term goals should also help you then be able to raise a lot of money, what you need along the way.
Got it. And sometimes there is always this kind of guilty feeling in the head of the CEO and of the founders of, are we being too aggressive, spending too much cash in a specific stage of growth, or are we being too humble and not spending enough, not investing enough in order to move the company forward? So what is your North Star or your advice for the ones who are with this internal dilemma to understand if they are being really ambitious or they are not having are not taking care of the cash component, which is critical for them to scale, and this can get them in trouble?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I personally am a big proponent of not raising money just because it's available. And therefore, while we also bootstrapped for quite a while, and if early stage founders ask me how can they get their seed round together, I would advise them try to do everything that you don't need a seed round, but that you have just customers paying you, because that's a much bigger validation that will help you execute in the business, learn a lot, and then raise money at a better price anyway. So I wouldn't optimize for raising money and then just having this dilemma of how to spend it. Overall, when I would raise money, and that's independent of any phase, is if additional cash in cash in a bank account allows you to do things differently. And that might be as a initially bootstrap company that you can really accelerate growth, but also at a later stage, it allows you to unlock new opportunities. For us, after Series B, we were able to make this acquisition with Roblox, which unlocked a lot of opportunity. Now we have a lot of growth levers in the go-to-market, but also continuing product where we will make big investments, and where we know by adding that cash, we can add that to those markets. I think what is important, and especially in the light of some of the recent public failures of IPOs with WeWork, or also Uber struggling, is that not just growing and spending money for the sake of it with no clear path to profitability, but for us it was always important that our core business runs well and is really profitable, and we could at any point in time, with the stable revenues we have, become and turn into a profitable company. At the same time, seeing if there's a lot of optionalities that can accelerate our growth, we were deliberately investing money in things like the payroll, in things new in the product, but also things like new markets, such as moving into Spain and selling there. And then having these things seen as investments, and then being really aggressive on doubling down on these investments, while still not diluting that with your core business, where your metrics then might go downhill.
Got it. Sounds amazing. Just some final words before we go to the last question of the show, about your learnings with your first acquisition. So this is something that very few founders at this stage have the opportunity to go through, and I think it would be very valuable to the audience to kind of have the do's and don'ts of your experience doing your first acquisition in a SaaS business.
Yeah, I mean, this is all very opinionated. This is my opinion, and take it with a grain of salt. It might be different for other businesses, but what I would think my learnings are: one, I'm very happy with the acquisition we took, so I would definitely do that again, but I only would do it again for the same reasons why we did it this time, and that's because it enhances our capabilities and we can really bring in a new product advancement. What I would not do at this stage is this kind of PE kind of acquisition strategy where you just buy up smaller competitors and try to integrate their customer base, because you want to be a winning product that beats competition, because you're the better product, then people custom switch from there, not because you buy them up and shut down products and pull them across. So that's what I wouldn't do. I would only make acquisitions like the one with Roblox, where it's a synergetic company, a team that fits really well to your team, and something that enhances you and just makes you faster on something which you otherwise would be doing internally. It's the high level elaboration of an acquisition opportunity, and we actually have elaborated similar opportunities and declined to it also since. The second one, do not underestimate the complexity that comes with it. And while as said, I would do it again, and it was highly beneficial for us, it also was and still is a big complexity, because we now have two offices where to bring together cultures, and despite the teams working well together before, as we had a partnership with them, and I think also now in all the, like, we have a very strong connection with them, it still is two different cultures, and it's still something which we have to continue to work together, especially given that they're two in locations, to align and to make sure that it feels like one company and everyone like continues to paddle in the same direction and is aligned on what we're trying to do. And that's something that's more complex that you think might be on paper, and therefore, yeah, spending a lot of time with the people, bringing people across the office is probably one of the key things, and the simplest things, but one which you really cannot do enough of.
Got it. Awesome. And that's our favorite question now. So if you would have the opportunity to meet yourself at the beginning of Personio, what advice would you tell yourself?
Well, I think there's of course a ton of things which I would be able to do different and better, and if we were get to start again. However, I think the biggest advices were things I learned now the importance of, but we were lucky enough to randomly get them right. And those are things like when you start a company, you would typically as a first-time founder, as we were, not really look as much on things like, is this a business that has a very relevance in the company, because you just think, okay, I can sell something to people, and I can convince people about that, but it's really only now that I understand this importance of for us being the system of record for our customers, and therefore them being really loyal to our product and being really deeply integrated in a lot of processes. Where if you're just if you picked even in the same in HR in SaaS different vertical, that's much more sort of nice to have and less core of what they use, then you have much more troubles both convincing them to buy but also sticking with your product. I think that's something which we just randomly got right without knowing that we were doing that. And then I guess the other thing which is more something which you could directly apply is the focus on hiring. As soon as you have product market fit and as soon as you have enough cash in the bank account, you're almost certainly going to be behind your hiring plan most of the time. And it took us 1.5 years or almost 2 years, where every quarter in the board meeting, we're like, luckily we're still hitting our business plan numbers and slightly overachieving even, but we could be much better even if we had more people in product, if we had more people, and then we always we of course added another recruiter, and then by the time this person was ramped up, we were again behind. So what we did was just say, okay, recruiting is our biggest priorities. We both internally are willing to spend the time on this to get the right kind of people, but also we're adding a lot of recruiters, and so we by now have 17 full-time people that just help like internally recruit for the company. And I'm not saying that is the exact number for any business, but I think overstaffing on recruiting is an expense that always pays off, because in the worst case, you're just having too many good candidates to choose from, and that's always a great situation to be in. So therefore, yeah, I think investing heavily into recruiting teams makes a lot of sense.
That's awesome. Hanno, it was really a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks so much for making the time, and you are invited to come in 1 year to let us know what are really the challenges to go from the free Androids today to the 6 Android that you are planning. Hopefully with your 17 recruiters, you will get even faster.
Thank you very much, Mike.
So to our community, thanks for being there. We keep here bringing you the best tech leaders in the world to help you scale from 2 to 100 million. Thanks for watching.